Plant-pollinator interaction is a mutualistic interaction where the plants and the pollinators are benefited. Plants get reproduction, animals get their food in this particular interaction. But not all floral visitors are interacting legitimately with the flowers, leading to cheating this interaction. One of that cheater is the nectar robber. Nectar robbing is a process. It's because of the behavioral issues as well as the trait matching problems of the pollinators and the flowers. The visitor enters flower illegitimately. Nectar robbing is normally seen in tubular flowers such as this. So there are very few bees which have very long mouth part. If it is approaching flower from the frontal side, it's so difficult to reach this nectary level. So there are tubular flowers which are really adapted for this pollination from the hawk moth or long-tongued visitors, or hummingbirds or sunbirds, etc. But the bees normally get nectar by probing at the basal part of the flower, and that necessarily not giving any problem to the flowers because the frontal side of the flower is still attractive, and the pollen legitimate visitors like the pollen foragers are still approaching flowers from the front. So this is known. So the nectar robber in this kind of flower sometimes gives some negative effect to the flowers by affecting the quality and the quantity of nectar produced in the flowers. So far it is not reported that a nectar robber is physically damaging or affecting the attractiveness of the flower from the frontal side. So the legitimate visitor may, but particularly the pollen foragers may still visiting these robbed flowers. But my system is a Oikos aspera. It's a tropical flowering plant, and that is seen in the tropical parts of India, Sri Lanka, in South Asia. The flowers are not such a long one. The flowers are very small and very short nectar tube. Many bees can still access nectar legitimately, but most of the nectar tube is protected by this corrugated and a little bit hardened calyx. Not very far from this plant, I have another plant of the same species where you can see the flower is really damaged by the floral visitors. So for example, this flower, you can see the lower petal is fissured, and this is by a bee. And this is a case where the nectar robber physically damaged or damaged the physical appearance of the flower. So this study which we published in Oikos is a part of our flagship program called the Flower Watch program, which we initiated in 2014. And Sangeeta Verma, my PhD student, is working on this topic for last 5 years. She watched flowers of Oikos aspera in several locations in the states of in the states of Kerala, Karnataka, and I personally visited places like Andaman Nicobar Islands, West Bengal, and places in Assam. In all these places, which are very geographically separated, in almost all these sites, we have seen this kind of damage on the flowers. So we asked several questions. Who is doing this? What is the effect of this damage on the plants, particularly on the plant reproductive parts, plant reproduction per se, and on the floral visitors? So before I tell those results, let me just tell you the Leucas aspera is a plant which receives the visits of nearly 90 species of visitors, which include a large number of bees. Around 60 species of bees so far we reported in different parts of South India. And we have a lot of moths because the flower opens 3 a.m. and it closes, it's not closing, it is shedding its petals, corolla, the next day morning around 8 a.m., 8 to 9 a.m. So its lifespan is more than 24 hours. So it's a very, very valid question, how this nectar robbing, by this kind of physical damage on the flowers, affecting such a large number of floral visitors. So we studied that at the species level, then at different functional group like large bees, how it is getting affected, and on the small bees, how it's getting affected, etc. So as a result, we found that nectar robbing is not really affecting the plant reproduction. There are two reasons for that. One reason is that the nectar robber, while doing this robbing, while just tearing this lower petal, is touching the upper hood. So the upper hood is the place where the anther and the stigma are arranged. So they are doing little bit of self-pollination. So the cross-pollination, even though that may not be giving the self-pollination, in self-pollination, the nectar robber itself is contributing. Another reason why we find the maternal function of plant reproduction, particularly the seed set, is not affected by this nectar robber, because the small tongue bees, not the small tongue bees, the small bees are still managing to land this flower, even though these petals are fissured. Most of the times they are landing straight on this upper hood and accessing this the pollen, and it is touching this anthers, and it is touching the stigma and carrying out pollination. But the impact of this nectar robbing is mostly on the large bees, which include a large number of 3 species of honeybees, Amygdala, that is one of the major solitary bee, Psilocopa, that is a carpenter bee, and all these bees, a lot of butterflies find this a problem because they are losing their landing platform. And who is doing this nectar robbing? So I'm unfortunate today to get this shot. This is very active in the morning. Now it is around 11 a.m. It's very active in the morning, and they that bee belongs to Halictidae, and it is a Hoplonomia species. And one interesting thing is they keep on cutting the flowers during the whole course of the day, and they will be revisiting to the same robbed flowers because the nectar is not really manipulated by this nectar robber. So that means the nectar is resecreted, and the quality of the nectar is not really affected by this nectar robber. So in brief, this is the first report where we report the nectar robber can really damage the appearance or the attractiveness of the flowers. And most of the times, the flowers which are not really deformed because of this nectar robbing in tubular flowers, in this particular case, we have seen, and as you see in this picture, This robbed flower looks entirely different, as if they belong to different species of plant. And the result is the nectar robbing is not affecting the maternal function of plant reproduction because of plant breeding system favors self-reproduction, and it is a self-compatible plant, but a large number of large bees losing its food plants. So say for example, nearly out of 60 species, 40 of them find it is a challenge to land on these flowers and to get the nectar. I look forward to your suggestions and your feedback on this study. So this is the first report of a nectar robber, which is a short-tongued bee, which I forgot to tell that most of the cases the nectar robbing is reported in large-tongued bees, like long-tongued bees like members belong to Apidae. Say for example, honeybees, bumblebees, etc. So this is the case where we find a nectar robber can be a very short-tongued bees, which should be actually, because the short-tongued bees are the one find it is so hard to reach the long tubular flowers. So this is the study where we find a robber is a short-tongued bee, and that can really damage, that can deface, that can really affect the attractiveness of the flowers to the rest of the legitimate pollinators.